Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Bro Man Class right here, and tonight I want to talk about something. And I did it once before, but I feel as if I got my stuff more organized now. And that's the topic of stereotypes. First I'm going to start off with the usual stereotypes, and that's the racial stereotypes. And some of you may say, like, Bro Man, Bro Man Class, all this stuff. Why you always talk about race? Why you always talk about something that you probably done to death already, or it's been done to death so much so that we already know the topics? Well, because racial stereotypes, even though it's been done to death, but it seems that people will follow it for the sake of either joking around or for the sake of not, or either not knowing where the stereotype comes from. Well, then, Johann Friedman Blumenbach. He was. I'm sorry if I butchered the last name, but it was Johann, and this was coming from a lyric from KRS. And he talked about there were five races in the world: Caucasian, Malaysian, Mongolian, American Indian, and Ethiopian. And even though he discovered those five classes of people, five races of people, but he did say this. He said that anthropology should not be used to discriminate or to promote discrimination due to the fact that we're all one human being. We're all under one center, under one sky, under one destiny, under one belief, and that's to survive. Well, he may not said that last part, but you catch my drift. Everybody has their own center of intelligence. Everybody has their own, way of doing things. Everybody thrives. Everybody survives. Everybody lives. Everybody dies. That's what he's basically getting out from. But Karras once claimed that, claimed that he believed that whites were superior, but it was those that came after, Johann. Johann. It was people that came after Johann. There were even explorers that tried to tell the king and the queen, look, there were people over there in the Americas that were civilized, who were civilized. They were kind people. They showed you the best. They even let you into their communities. They showed you kindness. They were civilized. They were human beings just like us. But guess what they were looking at? They were not looking at, the civilization. They were not looking at the people. They were looking at the land, the resources. And how does all this tie in with stereotypes in the first place? Well then, think about it like this. Sometimes a stereotype reveals a certain characteristic or, you know, just like 10% of what a culture is in terms of a civilization. What do I mean by that? Well then, if you look at stereotypes, especially, stereotypes about black folks and how the way we're nothing but fried chicken eating hip hop. Oh, and just like what they said, this was said in Do the Right Thing when John Tutorial played as Pino. Fuck Pino though, man, because I hate him. But he said this, and this was like the black stereotype for him. He said, and I quote, you gotta watch Do the Right Thing. He said, you gold teeth, gold chain wearing fried chicken and biscuit eating monkey, ape, baboon, big thigh, fast running, high jumping, spear chucking, 360-degree, basketball dunking, titsoon, spade, mullion. Now take your fucking piece of peace and go the fuck back to Africa. Now think about what he just said right there. That was the black stereotype right there in term and how the way people associate us, with basketballs, all that other crap, fried chicken. And, there are plenty of black folks who say, you know what, man, I'm giving up on the swine, I'm giving up on meat. They live a healthy lifestyle, and that's beautiful. And there are black people who own businesses, and they do their own thing, and they help out the community. And there's nothing wrong with that. And to say to go back to Africa, what they say about, the stereotype about the typical African, they're poor, they don't have much resources. Africa is the poorest continent in the world, and disease ridden and all that crap. But let me tell you something. Africa is in fact one of the richest continents in the world. You want to know why? Because it's rich in resources. It's rich in land. It's rich in opportunity. The reason why it's like this is because it was exploited, it was degraded, the people had to fight constant wars, and the disease were manufactured so they could dwindle down the population so they can actually exploit the people even more and take the resources. They don't look at Africa as the people, they look at Africa as the resource. That's the thing. So that stereotype about African people, being, the poorest of the poor, no, they were exploited, they were ridden, they were, just basically overall tar- tarnished. All because of what? Because they had the greatest land resource, and they were not looked at as people. They were looked at as a commodity or a casualty in war, not as a people, and that's fucking sad. And what's the stereotype, about us in connection with them? And you can go back to anthropology, you can go back to, biasness, and how what Johan said, I condemn biasness when it comes right down to anthropology, and especially when it comes right down to using anthropology as a way to be culturally biased. He was against that. Now, how does that tie in with, stereotypes, and how the way biasness with stereotypes come into play? Well then, remember, a stereotype reveals only 10% of it, 10% of a culture. That 10% is actually biased. And if not, more than that percent comes from either the government indoctrinating the people to believe a certain way of life, and then the people believe in that certain way of life to the point it becomes a culture. Basically, stereotypes are based off of a lie more than it's based off of a truth. Hence why there were many reasons why slavery was justified. And mind you, this is the black part. How the way slavery, constitutional racism, and how the way they say, oh yeah, there was a disease called negritude. How the way if you rub the skin, if you're a white person, you rub the skin against like somebody who looks just like me or somebody who's darker than me, and then you rub skin with them. The first symptom is that you turn black, and then your brain will turn to mush, rendering it unusable. Basically, trying to say that the brain of the African is feeble, even though we build your economy, we build your homes, we build basically where you live in, and we gave you sciences of the mind. You're gonna try to tell us that we're feeble of the mind. Isn't that a stereotype? Anyways, see, look, it's funny too because when it comes right down to stereotypes, everybody thinks that, oh, Africa is this. Why would I want to be associated with being an African? Let me tell you something. When you look at Africa, don't look at it from like the American point of view. Don't look at it from a Chinese point of view. Don't look at it from any other point of view but an African point of view. If you looked at Africa from an African point of view, you will realize that Africa is the most beautiful, the richest, the greatest continent on earth, especially with great, especially with many dynasties ranging from Egypt or ancient or the original name Kemet. Yes, Kemet. That was the original name of Egypt, not Egypt, because Egypt is comes from the Greek word Egyptians, meaning the land of the burnt skinned people, land of the black skinned people. And oddly enough, Kemet also means, you know, city of the burnt black skin of the black people. And Africa was named after, I think, a Greco-Roman, um, Greco-Roman general, Scorpius Africanus, because the original name of Africa was Akubalan, or yeah, Akubalan, not Africa, because Africa is also indoctrinated to be a name of somebody else. Now, I'm talking about only the black stereotype and how the way, not all, if you know your history, then you would not be ashamed to call yourself, African, a Kublaian, or Kushite, Kemet, you know, where you stand. But the problem is this: we don't want to associate ourselves to the stereotypes so much so that we hate ourselves. That's a sad thing too. But when it comes right down to the stereotypes, we are so much more than just what other people tell us from their own biased viewpoint. We are so much more than what other people try to say and try to tell us how to be. We're intelligent. We're beautiful. Our women, beautiful. And please lay off the perm. Lay off the hair crack, because that shit will burn your scalp. And then you're gonna wind up having unusable hair, and then you just be wondering like, man, what's wrong with my hair? How come I don't have any more hair? And why is my hair falling out? Easy. You're messing with that crack. Lay off it, man. Stop trying to follow the box. You know the box right there? Yeah, the TV. Don't follow that. That's indoctrination right there. And just like what Malcolm X once said, and some of you may say, why are you repeating what your leaders told you? And why are you repeating something that was said a long time ago? Because if you know the lessons that were taught back then, you will understand why they are important now. And Malcolm X once said, be careful when you read the newspapers, because your oppressor will make you hate the oppressed while loving the oppressor. Now think about it like that. We're out here looking at, oppressed TV or oppression in visual form right there, TV right there, and we think it's entertainment. No, it's just trying to teach you something. Teach you about a certain stereotype, a certain archetype that is associated with a certain group of people. I'll talk mostly about the black stereotype and how the way, all that other crap about us, it's just biasness. It's crap. It's not that. Stereotypes stereotypes, just like race, gender, class, and all that. You know what they are? They're just social constructs that eventually evolved into a way of life, a destructive way of life. And you want to talk about things even more, and I'll tell you this even further. And let's go further into, how shall I say, white people, because I'm not talking about black stereotypes now. I'm talking about all kinds of stereotypes, and how the way when you look at white people, what do you think? When it comes right down to white, what do you typically think of? Some people think of oppressor. Some people think of a racist. Some people think of, matter of fact, not even white people. Let's talk about just Americans, and then segue into white people. See, when you typically think of Americans, who do you really think of? What comes to most people's minds? People who look like people from Europe. People who look white, blue eyes, either auburn hair, red hair, flaming red, flaming orange, red, blonde, hazel eyes, either looking very pale, and then you got us, typically look like the typical American slave. You got the indigenous man, woman, typically look like, they have like the long hair, they have like the red skin, all that other crap, all that stuff. But that's just a stereotype, because not every person looks that stereotype. Not everybody follows that stereotype. I mean, I've seen some fit ass white people running around like this, and they got groove too. They know how to dance. Remember the stereotype about white men? Yeah, black people can't swim, and white people can't dance. White people can't dance, but they can. Hey, they took after us, and we took after them in terms of swimming. Oh man, I'm sorry, y'all, but Oh man, the stereotype about like white people can't dance. Like when you see that, you know that's utter bullshit. Like some of them can get down, and I genuinely respect that. And it was funny too because you know what do you and when it comes right down to the American stereotype, what do you typically think of? Fat, lazy, war-ridden, warmongering, very angry, very, obese, fast food eating. I ate a gyro like a few hours ago, and overall unhealthy. That's not true at all. Even though number one in obesity, number one in terms of like violence, well, or number two or something like that. Number one in terms of incarceration. All right, well, America's got a few number ones right over there. But here's the thing, not like I said, not everybody fits that stereotype. Because I mean, I see some fit people in America. I've seen some people who could, who could do a lot of sporting activities in America. Plenty of, culturalists in America, but that comes from an unbiased, keyword, unbiased viewpoint on things. Because as soon as you have a biased viewpoint on things, you have an ethnocentric look on things, which means that you believe that one race or one culture is superior to all others. And ironically enough, when I look at American culture and I look at how the way some people have a slave-ridden mind, they think American culture is the way to go. That's not necessarily the case. Especially, not every single culture is the dominant culture. Every culture is going to have its flaws. Every nation is going to have a downfall. And that's typically how it is. And after the downfall starts, every nation is going to build itself back up. And that's beautiful. And, you know, when it comes right down to that, and some of you may say, they, Clash, bro, man, what are you doing with this right here, man? With all this, you know, what is the red, what is the green, gold, and red stand for? See, look, when it comes right down to it, the green stands for the land, the gold stands for the sun, or necessarily gold itself, and red stands symbolizes the blood. And when it comes right down to it, what does all that stand for? And it stems from the Rastafari movement. And what's the Rastafari movement? If you know the Pan Africanist movement, especially when it comes right down to, the red, the black, and the green. The red, black, and green symbolizes basically the blood, the people, and the land, or the history, the population, and the resources. And when it comes right down to it, and if you look at, Marcus Garvey and what he stood for, and how the way he stood up for a certain amount of things. Sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but I gotta talk about this. And when it comes right down to it, how the way Marcus Garvey talked about, all African people, regardless of where they come from, should come together and unite. That's beautiful. And he had an ideal goal, and he was determined to set it off, and he was about to. But certain people, some people who look just like me, some people who look like the typical, white American, some people who look like oppressors. Because oppressors do come from different backgrounds and different looks, and they don't necessarily have to fit like this typical archetype. They just look like, hey, look, I'm an oppressor because I have like a certain amount of power over people, but I'll try to portray myself looking good, even though I'm gonna make the people suffer. He was yeah, that's what happened. He was sabotaged, and then where does the Rastafari movement come from? It comes from Emperor Haile Selassie I, the king of Ethiopia, matter of fact, the emperor of Ethiopia, the king of kings, Lord Emperor Halawasi because his first name, his actual name is Rastafari. That's the Rastafari colors come from. Red, black, and green. No, green, gold, green, gold, and red. Now, with that brief, intermission out there, now, talking about the American stereotype and how the American stereotype talks about typically of, Americans being angry. Let me tell you something. I met some patient ass Americans who would just be like, you know what, man, as much as you done me wrong, I'm willing to listen to you because, I know what it's like being down on my luck. I know what it's like, doing all that. I know what it's like being, out there and not able to express myself. So I'm gonna let you express yourself. I understand you had a long day, but I'm willing to sit down and talk with you. Is that cool? Nice. Now, like I said, some people fit the stereotype, some people don't. And that's true. And when it comes right down to the, the typical Asian stereotype, yeah, after I'm done, and then I'm going to segue in how the way it talks on. Now, after I'm done talking about the American culture, then I'm going to segue in talking about, white people stereotype. And then, talk about the Asian stereotype, and then, all that other stuff. And then talking about, yeah, and then talking about other stereotypes that come from other times as well. And then, the white stereotype, comes right down to, they betray, what the white stereotype is? Being, all what they say back then, and some of you may not agree, and some of you may get offended, but, this is what they say: if it's white, it's right. I'm like, not necessarily. Matter of fact, not really. Not always. Matter of fact, probably like 25% is right. Huh, who knows? And then, white people have been portrayed as, very kind, very polite, overly polite, stereotypically overly polite, friendly, capable of no harm and intent, all that other crap, about what's associated with white. But if you look at, what happened, certain amount of centuries back, then the stereotypes will actually be proven wrong. But like I said before, that's only because some people fit it and some people don't. Some people don't fit the stereotype. Like I said before, it's just a goddamn construct, a social construct. It's never meant to be taken seriously. It's never meant to be, taken as a lifestyle. It's only meant to indoctrinate, to further, how should I say this in a more respectful tone, meant to separate people more than try to bring them close together. And when it comes right down to white people, what do you like? When I look at the history, his story, that's the indoctrinated version. Let's look at the mystery. Some people say they came out of caves, some of them had civilizations. No denying, they did have civilizations. Look at the Greco Roman culture, even though there were some black people in there too. There's a black presence in nearly every culture. Even in the earth, like what they say, if you go back a little bit further, the blacker you become. But other than that, what do they typically say? Like when I look at the historical context, the historical, the history of the people. They had like a lot of rebellions, they had bloodshed, they had to fight for their freedom, which I respect. They were not afraid to oppose monarchies, and they were not particularly the healthiest of people. Hey, I'm not trying to say. Hey, look, I'm not attacking white people. I mean, look at Europe during its dark ages. Look at how the way a plague managed to hit and take out like 2/3 of the population. And how the way they didn't have proper sewage systems, they didn't have, proper sanitation. They didn't, some of them probably didn't even know how to take baths. That's how filthy they were. I'm going off by historical context. I'm looking at, what I've read in history books, what I've learned in classes, and some of you may say, what are you trying to say? You're trying to say that white people are filthy? I'm like, let me tell you something. At one point, you were. But then, some people came up to the continent and said, hey, we'll help you out. We'll teach you how to clean yourselves properly. And some of those people look just like me, and some of those people, look like other white people, and some of them look just like, look like typical Asian. Who knows? And help them, get clean, help them read, help them, get out of the darkness, which was the dark Middle Ages, where they came out of feudal times and entered into a time of enlightenment. And then thinking about enlightenment and how the enlightened period, which was after, which I remember correctly, which was after the Crusades, but after the Crusades, but I believe during the time of exploration, and how they were actually thinking of more like a scientifically inclined mind, as opposed to just looking at things at face value, believing in the Bible, believing in the bishop. And I'm going to get into religion stereotypes first. I'm going to get to religious stereotypes sooner or later, don't worry. But then, not every one of them, fit the bill of being violent. Like I said before, what I say about stereotypes, they are utter bullshit. So if you don't fit the stereotype, don't worry. You're good. Because like I said before, it's just a cultural biasness that's meant to push a certain image onto the population so it could justify hurting other people. Now then, talking about white people and how the way they were somewhat giving you a little bit of a history lesson, but don't worry. Looking at that right there, if you don't fit the history, let me tell you something, because not every white person, like I said before, is not a bad character. Joe Hine was one of them. Nikola Tesla, you know him? He was basically a great inventor who tried to use, electricity as a renewable sense of energy. He didn't mind if his patents were stolen, as long as it was able to help people. And I respect that. There were other people too, and I generally respect that as well. Because they said, wait a minute, these people are civilized, our people need help. And then you look at Karl Marx, and you look at how the way he tried to think about, he was a he was ahead of his time somewhat, because he wanted to help people. He wanted to help people. He wanted to help the working class get out of the oppressive grip of totalitarianism, and how the way the grip of totalitarianism was actually squeezing the life out of the working class, the working man, the one who actually supports the the upper classes. Because without the working class, the upper classes would just fall, and that's utterly true. Now, how does all of this tie in with stereotypes? Like, think about it. What do typical stereotypes look like to you, especially when it comes right down to the Asian stereotype? And Asian stereotypes, they're very smart people. They are, they're very smart only because they study. They are, I don't know what the other I don't know much about Asian stereotypes other than the fact that, and some of you may get offended when I say this, but when it comes right down to Asian stereotypes, what do they say? Like they have slanty eyes, They have, messed up teeth, and they typically have like a bit of a high IQ or something like that. Stuff that you see off of TV. That entertainment box. Indoctrination and entertainment form. Yeah, like I said before, they don't fit the some of them don't fit the description. And about how the way back then, the white. I remember I read something before where it talked about in China, how the way people back then would say like the whiter your skin, the more beautiful you were considered to be. And I was just like, okay, that was the that's what they believed in. That was the culture, and that's the thing, like some stereotypes fit into a culture, and how the way they respected scholarliness. Not necessarily true because during the time when Confucius was a teacher, Confucius, his certain teachings and how the way he teaches about indulgence and how the way certain minds of human beings in general are overindulgent and how the way we can tame ourselves. I know that sounds something similar to Buddhism or well, not Hinduism but Buddhism, but you know, when it comes right down to that, they typically were afraid of people awakening and actually thinking for themselves, using the teachings of somebody else who was considered to be a radical, who told a different perspective than what was indoctrinated, otherwise known as the truth. Some of you may say that the truth doesn't have a side, and that's true. I mean, in the world of indoctrination, sometimes the opposition will will be portrayed as bad, but you got to question yourself: is this true, or is this just a propaganda? Now, that's where stereotypes, like when it comes right down to stereotypes, you got to think about the same thing as well. Is it true, or is it just propaganda? Now then, when it comes right down to to Asian people in general, not every single one of them fit that stereotype. Some of them are smart, some of them do study, but when I look at Japan, when I look at some Chinese people, when I look at just Asian people in general, how the way in America and how the way in certain like in every part of the world, whatever you have in urbanized area, an urbanized city, you're gonna notice like there's a class structure. And some of you may say, well, duh, bro, man, that's obvious. But let me get down to the nitty gritty. When you look at the class structure, think about what was going on in America and how the way, during the time of war on drugs, how the way, black people's houses would get socked in by batter rams, and how the way sometimes, during the time of Crystal Knot and during the Blitzkrieg, when they were trying to destroy, Jewish owned businesses and all that crap. Think about what was going on in America. You got racist people coming into black neighborhoods, destroying, black owned stores, destroying homes, burning down homes. And yet they're gonna go around telling other people how to act when America doesn't even know how to act itself. And then how the way they try to say Hitler was the worst human being in the world, because he killed 6 million Jews. Let me tell you something. Hitler, he was a freak of nature. I'll admit that much. He was an abomination because of what he did to those people. But compared to him, to what happened to the Native Americans, what happened to what happened to us as a people here in America, and what happened to my own people in Africa. And some of you may say, so where do you belong? What tribe do you belong to? Let me tell you something. And just like what the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey once said, I would rather take a continent over an island any day. I am African here, I am African now, and I will be African forever. I don't care what tribe I belong to, because that's separatist. That's a separate way of thinking. We are all one people, and that's beautiful. That's why I identify with, Mother Africa. Not only is the birthplace of civilization, but it's also a birthplace of wealth and a birthplace of beautiful ancestry. Now then, back on after that little, you know, after that little, intermission from onto like looking at urbanized areas, if you notice, you know, when you look at urbanized areas, you realize that they went through the same thing. They have poverty, they listen to music, they use some form of music or some form of art or some form of communication and some form of slang to overcome a certain degree of oppression or depression. Listen to the word I said. I escape, but overcome. See, when you overcome something, you understood what was in your way, and then you knew how to either maneuver or to go through it, and that's beautiful. And then think about it in that terminology. When you look at certain parts of China, and you look at certain parts of Japan, you look at certain parts of Africa, you look at certain parts in the Middle East, you look at certain parts of different cultures of the world, they know how to do stuff in their spare time. And you just say, wait a minute, this reminds me of what we do back at home. Just like what Dougie Fresh once said, back home in Africa, seeing people that look just like me, and I knew I was home. Sometimes the people you identify with may not look like you at all. In fact, they may actually be, how shall I say, a bit lighter than you. They may be a bit darker than you. They may be, of a different religion. They may be of a different, way of thinking. But at the same time, when you come right down to a common ground, you say, damn, where the hell have you been all my life? And that's the Asian stereotype, and the Spanish stereotype. The Spanish stereotype about Hispanics and all that stuff, and how the way they're just nothing more than just breeding horses. I know that's very disrespectful right then and there, but it's something that I heard him do the right thing. It was this racist white cop. Now the reason why I say racist white cop because of the way he said right here, he said, "You go," and I quote this. You can watch him do the right thing, and you just be like, wow. He said, "You gotta be in 15 in the car, 30 in the party, and pointing shoes, rap wearing, yo, me the Puerto Rican cocksucker, yeah, you." And he talked about that. I was just like, damn. At first, when I looked at Do the Right Thing, this is what I thought of it. Just from those little snippets, you think it's about like a racist film. And funny enough, when I looked at the film, I saw something, far grander. I thought it was talking about like racial unity, and it was talking about, how people from different ethnicities can come together. But problem is this, there are certain groups of people who actually think they are superior than other people because of either how they look, because of what they were taught in school, or because of, what was the frame of mind during that time. And the real sad part is the fact that when it comes right down to it, and how the way lives were actually affected, either, by the war on drugs, by all this other stuff, and then, it hurts the people. And how the way it separated people so many times because of how the way somebody looks instead of how the way somebody acts. And just like what Dr. King once said, I want to live in a nation where my children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And you want to know what the real funny part is? We do live in that time, but America is just not the nation for it. Because matter of fact, I gotta stop saying we when my people and certain other groups of people were affected by it. America, keeps on pushing that institutional racism. It's just much more hidden than it is, more overt. And then religious stereotypes. Let's get on with it like that. And some of you may say, like, oh, you're going to talk about religion. Oh, this is going to be real good. Those people, people who practice religion, they're not bad. And that's true. Anybody who practices religion is not a bad person. Just like anybody who practices religion is not a good person. But I'm going to keep it real and I'm going to keep it off. I'm going to keep it right. Because when I look at religion, I looked at how the way it was used to justify murder, it was used to justify conquering, it was used to justify, rape, it was used to justify pillaging, it was used to justify, ethnocentrism, you know, and how the way it was used to justify discrimination, and how the way it was used to justify killing somebody just because they don't believe in the same thing as you. And don't worry, there are some people who look at religion and say, hey, this is what I believe in. It changed me for the better. It made me into a better person. And you know what it did to me? It did something very good to me. And I say, look, I want to do this because it helped me grow. It helped me achieve some morals that I never thought I would ever achieve before. And I say, if they are good morals, good, keep them. Because good morals that were taught onto you can eventually help you realize who you really are. While bad morals or vices will just be used to justify slothful thinking or indolence. What does it exactly mean? And it's just sad too because when you look at religion, you typically think of overzealous people holding Bibles, going to church or going to the mosque, going to these different places of religious origins, and then practice different religions so they could feel better about themselves or to look good in front of the eyes of their so-called creator. Some people do good because they choose to. Some people do good not because of a Bible, but because they say, there's good in my heart, I want to do it because I choose to. And when it comes right down to it, religion, in a sense, is not bad, but those who practice it, those who use it for evil purposes but mask it as good, they are the parasites that actually destroy what does it mean to practice a religion. And my final thought, on the whole thing about stereotypes. Like I said before, stereotypes are bullshit. Just like, gender, just like, race, just like class, just like, all that. It's just a social construct so it could help level a playing field which people can actually control a certain group of people and keep them under a sense of control, as opposed for them to think sense of being themselves or sense of having a thought. And if you really think about it, look at the game chess and how the way they're the pawns. The pawns, if you notice, there are more pawns than there are actually other pieces. What I mean in terms of numbers, and some of you may say, duh, but think about it in a more symbolic or even in a more, class-based oriented way. Because when a pawn reaches the other side, they become the other piece that they want. Or they earned enough privilege and status to move up, and then they could either become a rook, a knight, a bishop, a king, or a queen. But what happens if all the pawns happen to turn against the order or the structural order? Rooks represent soldiers. Well, knights represent soldiers. Rooks represent, guards. Bishops represent religion. King and queen represents the ruling class. What happens when all the pawns say, wait a minute, who the hell are you to tell me what to do? You don't govern my life, I govern my own life. That's what people need to do with stereotypes. They need to think about it and say, wait a minute, does this govern my life? Or is it just something that you want to push on to me? And just like I said before, when it comes right down to stereotypes, now everybody's going to follow it, thus it's bullshit. And everybody knows that. But some people know that, but they don't implement it towards their own life. They don't do it. They don't say, you know what, man, I'm staying the hell away from it. Stereotypes are not for me. So that thing can stay the fuck away from me. And you know what I know the fun thing is? Not everybody can do it. And you wanna know what the irony is? It's not that hard. And with that, YouTube, this is Roman Class saying, signing out. I one. Hope you have a great morning or evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. Hope you have a great time. And if you like what I do, you can like, share, subscribe. And if you don't agree with what I say, then leave a comment saying why you don't agree. Give a legit reason instead of just raging. And just say I disagree because of this reason. And I say that's cool. All right. Later. Hope you have a great night or morning.